Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the hidden mechanics of human perception, creativity, and stress. Picture your brain for a second. Think of it like this massive, high-performance engine. It's incredibly powerful, right? It processes huge amounts of data, sparks brilliant ideas, and, literally keeps you alive. But here's the catch. Just like a car's engine, it runs on a strictly finite amount of fuel, and it's bound by some very real biological limits.
Have you ever been in a crowded, noisy room, or maybe just hitting the end of a really long workday and suddenly felt like your brain just cannot take in one more piece of information, like it's literally full? Well, that feeling of overwhelm is incredibly common. But here's what we're going to discover today. Feeling overwhelmed isn't some personal failure or a sign of mental weakness. It's an actual, measurable, biological event happening right inside your nervous system.
Section 1, Filtering the World, Handling Sensory Data. So to really understand why our mental engine overheats sometimes, we've got to look at how it manages to run so efficiently in the first place. See, we are constantly bombarded by an overwhelming stream of sensory data, sights, sounds, smells, everything. To survive all this input, our brain actively blocks most of the world out. So the crucial point is that sensory filtering happens constantly, entirely behind the scenes, without you even noticing. Neurological research tells us this filtering happens both at the peripheral level, like your ears just naturally tuning out the hum of the air conditioner, and at the central level, where your brain actively suppresses certain signals. It's a miraculous little mechanism, honestly. It's exactly what lets you sit in a bustling coffee shop and still lose yourself in a good book.
But your brain isn't just a bouncer blocking things at the door. It's a master synthesizer. Through a process called sensory integration, it cross-references all these different streams of information. It essentially fills in the blanks of ambiguous data by pulling from your past experiences. This is exactly why hearing just a few notes of an old song can instantly flood you with a vivid emotional memory. Your mental engine is just constantly, seamlessly stitching reality together so things keep running smoothly. Section 2, the highly sensitive brain processing more data. Let's move to and see how this builds into our next concept. Because what actually happens when a brain's sensory filter is naturally set a little bit wider, letting way more of that raw data flood into the engine?
Well, this brings us to the highly sensitive person, or HSP. Innate sensitivity is a very specific biological trait where the nervous system is structurally different. It processes sensory data much more deeply. And it's super important to clear this up right now. This biological difference gets mistakenly written off all the time as just mere shyness, fearfulness, or introversion. But it is hardwired biology. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how common this is. It isn't some rare one-in-a-million anomaly. Research actually shows that roughly 20% of the population, literally a massive 1/5 of humanity, operates with this hyper-perceptive brain engine. That means 1 in 5 people around you are taking in more of the world, feeling it more deeply, and processing it more thoroughly every single day. Section 3, The Price of Genius, Creativity and Madness. We're going to push to the extreme end of the sensory spectrum now, exploring that fascinating, razor-thin line between profound creative brilliance and severe mental exhaustion. Over 2,000 years ago, Aristotle made this incredible observation. He said, "No great genius has ever been without some divine madness." And this uncanny connection between high creativity and mental struggle has absolutely puzzled us for thousands of years. I mean, why is it that so many brilliant luminaries throughout history, from Vincent van Gogh to Virginia Woolf, endured such profound psychotic or depressive episodes? Modern psychology actually offers a pretty compelling answer through a concept called latent inhibition. Basically, this is your capacity to screen out stimuli you already know are irrelevant. Recent studies show that highly creative achievers often have significantly decreased latent inhibition. Their mental engine just doesn't filter out the background noise. Now, this creates brilliant cognitive flexibility, letting them connect dots the rest of us completely miss. But the trade-off? A massively high risk of burning out from data overload. To help separate a healthy genius from actual illness, researcher Albert Rothenberg coined the term Janushian process. This describes healthy creative thinking, which is highly conscious, intentional, and purposeful, even when you're mashing together totally opposite ideas. Psychotic thinking, though, that's more like a tornado. It's haphazard, erratic, and nonsensical. Essentially, creative thinking is managed by the creator, while psychotic thinking completely overpowers its originator. The tragic reality here is that elite thinkers often push their mental engines far past their absolute limits. It's a lot like how an Olympic athlete pushes their physical anatomy right to the breaking point. The immense strain can trigger severe psychotic crises. The renowned poet Sylvia Plath, who struggled deeply with her own mental health, captured this so beautifully and tragically. She wrote, "When you are insane, you are busy being insane. When I was crazy, that was all I was."
Section 4, Energy and Allostatic Load, the biology of stress. So what exactly is breaking down under all that pressure? To answer that, we really have to pivot to the hard biology of stress. We need to look at what it actually costs the physical body to process all this stress, emotion, and sensory data.
The scientific term for how our body prepares for stress is allostasis. I know, it sounds like heavy academic jargon, but the concept is actually pretty simple. Allostasis is just your brain spending its precious, finite physical fuel to predict and prepare for environmental challenges. Every single time your brain detects a threat, or even just a really complex problem, it revs the engine, and that consumes real, physical energy.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when that anticipatory state is activated chronically. It creates what scientists call an allostatic load. The brain's stress response demands an immense amount of energy, literally driving the body into a state of hypermetabolism. That means your energy expenditure spikes way above what is naturally optimal for you. This brings us to the energetic model of allostatic load, which basically tells us that living organisms have a hard limit on the energy they can consume. If your brain engine is running in overdrive for too long, it literally steals fuel away from your body's other repair systems. The energy being burned for chronic stress competes directly with the energy you need for growth, longevity, and cellular repair, which causes very real biological wear and tear.
Section 5, the anatomy of overwhelm. When the engine redlines. Let's bring this science into clinical reality. What exactly happens inside your brain when this allostatic load becomes too much and the engine finally just redlines? This is the true anatomy of an overwhelmed mind. When overwhelm hits, it triggers a really rapid domino effect. First, the amygdala, that's your brain's fear center, goes into total overdrive. Second, stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline just flood your system. Third, this chemical flood actively suppresses your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that handles logical problem solving. And finally, your executive function completely shuts down, leaving you with intense mental fog and disorganization. Remember, feeling overwhelmed is not a personal failure. It is a literal neurobiological shutdown. Section 6, restoring the balance, cooling the engine. Okay, here is the good news. Because overwhelm is a biological process, there are evidence-based biological ways to cool that engine back down. We can actively restore the balance and manually reboot your logical brain. These clinical strategies target your nervous system directly. Take simple deep breathing, for example. It actually stimulates the vagus nerve to manually lower your heart rate. Mindful movement helps burn off that excess cortisol we talked about. And techniques like cognitive reframing or breaking tasks down into tiny micro steps, they help you bypass that executive function shutdown. You're giving your brain small, easy wins to rebuild momentum without demanding a massive spike in energy. So what does this all mean for you? Well, I want to leave you with this final thought. What if you reframed how you view your own mental fatigue? What if your stress and overwhelm aren't signs that you're failing, but rather undeniable evidence of a powerful, hyperperceptive engine doing its absolute best to process an incredibly complex world? By understanding exactly how your mental engine uses its energy, you can finally start protecting it. Thank you so much for exploring the science of the mind with us in this explainer today.